That's the latest. I'm Theda Silver.
Black Country Xtra.
Yes, this is the Listen with Lee show. And this is Lee Benson on Black Country Xtra. I've got a great guest today. Shall I tell you who he is? No, he can introduce it himself. Let's get on with my show.
Hello, you're listening to Ryan Stark on the Listening with Lee show on Black Country Xtra.
Let's get on with the show. Well, my special guest today is Ryan Stark, who comes from a place very near to the Black Country, but not quite. That famous place called All Other Routes. Is that not correct?
Mainly, yes. On the whole. Yes, I come from Redditch.
Oh, well admitted. Ryan Stark, welcome to the Listen with Lee show.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Now, that's told us enough about where you come from. Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm gratefully retired, to be fair. I've been a business analyst all my life, so I've been very deeply into IT. I decided after COVID enough was enough, which was fortunate because by then I'd started writing. I've written 3 books in the Daly and Whetstone series. They're police crime dramas set in northwest London. And I've written 2 books in the Aidan Beckett series, which are international crime thrillers.
Wow.
This latest book that I've written, An Invisible Murder, is the 4th book in the Daly and Whetstone series. So it continues on the jovial japes of Scott Daly and Deborah Whetstone, part of the northwest London.
That implies there's going to be a lot more then, is that right?
Oh, they're all individual books. They all sit in their own right and can be read separately, but they're part of the series, yes.
Good man.
Yeah.
Very organised, aren't you?
I try my best to be organised, yes. One of the great things about writing is everybody thinks it's just a guy sitting in a room banging away on a typewriter and all the words just come out.
Isn't it?
No, actually, I've just spent a good 3.5, 4 months solidly re-editing and editing and getting somebody else to edit and proofreading and doing all the other things that are involved in making the jumble of words into simple, coherent sentences.
It is an art in itself, isn't it?
It is, and anybody who goes into writing should bear in mind that it's only 25% of the task of producing a finished work.
And that's excluding the creative thinking time.
Yeah, the great thing about creative thinking is a lot of it can be done when you're asleep. The important thing to remember is have a notepad or an iPhone or something by the side of your bed because you will not remember the idea in the morning.
Yes, some of the greatest ideas I've not remembered were fabulous at the time.
Oh,
and
yes.
that is very good information. Have something to write it down. Or in the old days, I used to have a cassette, like you'd press it down, one of those Sony Walkman type thingies. And you'd wake up and go, I don't remember doing that. Did I write that?
It's when you wake up in the morning and you've written, wizard picks stone up and breaks it. And you're thinking in the morning as you're eating your porridge and drinking your tea, what on earth was I thinking at the time? And it doesn't mean anything, obviously. It was part of a dream.
Did at the time. So, of these series, do you become a different person when you're writing them? Do you dive into your book? Do you become part of that life that you're within writing? Or do you maintain a sense of I'm writing, but I'm really quite a serious person outside the zone?
No, I was always far too serious. I'm too old to be serious nowadays.
Oh, good man.
If you haven't grown up by the time you're 60, you don't have to anyway, apparently. It's the law. So what I try and do, specifically with the Aidan Beckett ones, because he's an English-born person who moved over to Washington, D.C., he's very American. Mm-hmm. So I have to switch the computer to American, the language to American. I have to think American, and I very much get into character on that.
That must be very difficult coming from Redditch, though.
It's extremely difficult, and I use a lot of resources for that. I use people who live in Canada and America to help me with that.
Wow.
Because there are certain things I just simply don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm writing a piece for the Redditch Writers Group at the moment. If you're into writing, please come along to the Redditch Writers Group.
Where do you meet?
We meet in the library. We're meeting next week, which is Tuesday of next week.
Is that every Tuesday?
And it's every other Tuesday.
Oh, every other Tuesday. Yeah. Go to Redditch, bring your passports.
But I'm writing something at the moment which is about the Great Depression in New York. And so that is very not me. And I think the great thing about writers is we can write about things that aren't you. When I murder somebody, some of the ways I think of murdering them are particularly gruesome, and I would never dream of doing them myself.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely positive. And they'll never find the bodies anyway. So the great thing is I can be somebody else rather than me.
Yeah, well, that's in that creative world, that's what it is. But your research, the point is, obviously you're doing stuff stateside. Your research is really not you. And you're having to do a lot of research and relying on other people to help you with that.
Yes. I'll tell you a little story. I was up in Kirkcudbright, which is in a lovely place in Scotland. Please don't go. It's a really lovely place. It needs to stay that way. Kirkcudbright had a book week, and I was invited along to do a talk on how you take an idea through to a final manuscript. Uh-huh. And afterwards, I spoke to a lady who was there helping out, and she said, Proof of Death, your Aidan Beckett book, it's set in Australia. How on earth do you know all of that about the native Australians? You've even got the words of the language right. How do you know this stuff? I said, I did my research. I talked to people. I sat translating Maori documents and Aboriginal documents to see what they were saying and the way they said them, because people speak often in the way they write in their native languages. When it came to Aidan Beckett, who is the international thriller guy, I've checked on the date he's supposed to be flying to a place, what time the planes took off, what planes they were, where they landed, whether anything happened, because there is some train spotter somewhere who is going to say,
I know what you're going to say.
Oh no, he couldn't possibly have made that trip. Yes, he could.
Yeah.
And he could have picked up the car at Broken Hill, and it would have been the type of car he was driving.
That's his research.
I've been to a gun club and handled guns.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned how to strip down a Glock.
Mm-hmm.
I've fired the guns. So when I talk about the kickback against his injured shoulder, I know what the kickback feels like. Because the most important thing is that the person who's reading it has to be there in the moment.
Bring him into the reality.
Absolutely, yeah.
God. Well, stopping that reality for a minute,
Mm.
I tend to add a little bit of good music into my shows. And so I'm going to ask you for some good music, because you haven't researched this. So pick a song for me that you'd like to hear.
Okay. The interesting thing is, as my life has turned out, that I'm making stuff all the time. Probably the first song that had any real impact, serious impact on me, was Supertramp, Dreamer, from the album Crime of the Century. It had featured on a Noel Edmonds breakfast show all those years ago, and I really liked it. I went out and bought the album, and it was one of those albums where every single track is worth listening to. And if I got it out today, it's still worth listening to.
So you want to hear Dreamer by Supertramp?
I do indeed.
I shall go get it for you now.
Black Country Extra.
So you just told me off air, and now we're back on air again.
Aha.
You've actually spoken to Roger Hodgson,
Yes.
the original lead singer of Supertramp.
It was an interesting thing that I heard one of their records recently, and all of a sudden I turned to the wife and I gave her the names of every single one of the original members of Supertramp, having not thought about them for 30 odd years, which is just bizarre because I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. Yes, I spoke to Roger Hodgson about a record that they had out before Crime of the Century, when they were unknowns, and the album was called Indelibly Stamped, and the second track on the second side is a track called Rosie Had Everything Planned. And this is one of my great passions. It's songs where there is a story told, but it's incomplete.
The story's incomplete.
You don't know where it came in or where it goes afterwards. You're just given a soundbite of a story. And
That's interesting.
This is of a woman who has been arrested following the death of her husband, and she's holding the shotgun that she's just killed him with because she thinks he's done something and he hasn't.
But she killed him.
She killed him. Now, they don't go into detail about what she did, an affair or some crooked deal, whatever it was.
Could have made the bed wrong.
He could simply have put the wrong type of sugar in a coffee.
Yeah, we know.
But the whole point of it is, I love songs which are a story that is waiting to be told. There are lots of different songs which are partway through a story. One I'm writing at the moment is based on The Boxer, a Simon & Garfunkel song of Bridge Over Troubled Water. And it doesn't really tell you much of a story. It's about a boy who goes into the big city and meets a boxer. He's lost, he's alone, he's trying to make his way. But it doesn't go any further than that. So what I've tried to do, as you're walking past somebody, you don't know anything about their life apart from that moment when you see them to when you leave them. And they've got a whole other life going on. So I like the fact that there are stories there to be told. And one of my side projects is to write these up into stories, 2,000, 4,000 word stories, and put them together as a book.
Whole collection of songs, stories.
The stories that the songs never told. Yeah.
Nice one, Ryan.
Because they are brilliant ideas. They're gold dust. And I wrote to Roger Hodgson via his agent, and he came back to me. I said, well, can I do this? Can I take Rosie Had Everything Planned and turn it into a story of my own? And he basically said to me, do with it what you like.
Cool.
And I asked him what the real story was. He said, there is no real story.
Yeah.
Basically, something's happened. She shot her husband, and now they've arrested her. And it's up to you now to figure out what that is. And
Let's let the creative mind do what it wants to do. What other song have you had a real good journey with?
One of the other songs that I really love was Hazard, the Richard Marx song, which hopefully many of your listeners will remember. It was in the 90s, I think. He really didn't like the song, and he put it on the side for a long, long time because it didn't mean anything to him. And then he finished writing it. 6 to 8 months later, it was written. And all of a sudden it became a very big hit. Broadly speaking, a mother and her boy move into a small town in Nebraska and they don't fit in. After a while of not fitting in, the boy is befriended by one of the local girls. They like to sit and talk and so on. But one night she goes to the river and disappears. And the police figure it must be him. Well, why not? He's the strange one, isn't he? Mm-hmm. That's the whole of the story. We don't know more. We don't know what happened first. We don't know what happened afterwards. We don't know where the girl went. We know nothing about it.
Do we know now?
I know, yes.
You'll have to buy the book then, won't you?
Oh, definitely.
Have you got the title of this book? Working title?
No, I haven't at this stage. But it might be stories that the song's never told.
That's cool. I like that.
But we'll work on that one. I've got another Aidan Beckett book I'm writing at the moment.
Tell me a little bit about Aidan Beckett then. He's your main character, yes?
Yes. Aidan Beckett is 31, 32. He was orphaned when he was a baby, so he was passed off to in-laws who brought him up and adopted him, and he lived in Washington, D.C. His adopted father was an accountant. His mother was nobody in particular. It didn't really matter for the story. But now he's alone. He works for an organisation called Taurus. They took him on when he was invalided out of the Marines with a shattered shoulder from a gunshot. So he then had to find a new career. They found him. He's highly trained. Why let all that government training go to waste? So he's an international troubleshooter. And the series I'm writing at the moment is all about Amber Rock. He's been told, Amber Rock, go seek. Something happened in the early 90s and it's been shrouded in mystery. And nuclear scientists who've been busily finding out what's going on have all mysteriously died. So he's on the trail of Amber Rock to find out what happened to the one missing scientist, the one who didn't die, Max Anderson. Mm-hmm. And so far we've got him through Europe and he's traced down Amber Rock. He knows what Amber Rock is now. He knows what happened. And now it's all about bringing Amber Rock to book.
How the hell did you come up with that idea?
Oh, well, that's the secret. If I told you that, I'd have to shoot you.
Oh. Well, not yet. Not till we get to the end of the show.
Let's press stop first, shall we?
Fascinating the way you work. I mean, have you ever considered writing a book based around Redditch?
There is a wonderful writer I've met called Tony Bassett. And the interesting thing about Tony is he writes about Redditch and he lives in northwest London. I write about northwest London and I live in Redditch. I haven't spoken to him yet. I've met him once at a fair I went to. But I haven't spoken to him.
He needs you for research.
He needs me for research and I need him for research, yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's called symbiosis, mate.
It is. Well, you see, I mean, in the Black Country, which is not far from Redditch anyway, there are areas, like villages within a mile of each other, where people don't even talk to each other. They are that still secular. It's fabulous. I mean, it's like old history, but you get battles going on between something like Gornal Wood, Lower Gornal, Upper Gornal. They don't exist.
Well, Redditch is a bit of an island in itself.
It's an all other routes.
It's an all other routes. And you can actually go through Redditch without actually seeing a single person. I don't tend to do that. I tend to avoid people anyway. But
some lovely little bits in Redditch, I have to say. I've got to flag it up occasionally.
There was a time when I worked in North Wales. I worked in a place called Holywell in North Wales. I actually worked at British Aerospace at Broughton, which was in England, just over the border. And there is a street going through a place called Sorgall, which I won't even attempt to spell, where on one side of the road they're all Welsh. On the other side of the road, they're all English. I happened to be made redundant. There were jobs going in Chester, which is on the English side, and I simply couldn't get them because I was on the Welsh side. So I ended up travelling to Cardiff.
No wonder we can't sort the world problems out.
One of the things I've learned the hard way, I think, is that we're all basically clannish and tribal, and it's never going to change. Something I keep saying to my kids when they say, why doesn't it get any better, is moths still bump into light bulbs, and the light has been around for 100 years. Because that instinct to travel and follow the moon has been there for millions. So
all just visualise that. Poor moths.
Yeah. All the things we're doing to civilise human beings are in the blink of an eye in terms of human evolution. And our brains can't adapt that quickly.
Well, some of us are lone wolves. I never consider myself being part of a pack. I have to be honest.
Well, I've never been part of a pack in my life, but that's okay. You can watch from the outside, can't you?
Oh, I often say, as an outsider's opinion, this is my opinion.
Yes. I always say, I'm not giving you my opinion. You might hit me.
Oh no, I wouldn't do that. Listen, let's go on for another song then. What would you like as your second piece?
I think I'd like the Richard Marx song.
Would you?
Hazard, yes, please.
Hazard.
Yeah.
And you've explained to it why. So,
Yeah, it's
without
absolutely
further ado,
brilliant song. Yeah.
warning, warning, there is no hazard. This is Richard Marx on Listen with Lee. Well, Ryan, we've been having some good conversation so far. We've got some good music, which means it's time for you're going to have to read something from An Invisible Murder.
An Invisible Murder. So to set the scene briefly, we're talking about the North West London Homicide Investigation Unit. The two main characters in that are Chief Inspector Scott Daly and Detective Sergeant Deborah Whetstone. They have been called out to an explosion in Green Street, Harrow, in which two people died. It was a gas explosion. Basically, all of the house is down. They've investigated the scene. They've done their interviews, but they haven't tidied anything up yet.
What year are we at?
We're roughly 2013.
Okay.
So there's certain things they can't have, certain things they can have at that time. And Scott Daly is doing his usual thing. As the Chief Inspector, he's a senior investigating officer. So he's going through that whole imposters thing. Can I actually do this? And at the same time, he's got a new superintendent, Leslie Hacker, who is not the best person to help him through that.
That's what you call setting the scene. Take it away, Ryan.
Operation Scion, the name for the investigation into the Green Street deaths, came from an algorithm, a random word conveying no meaning or emphasis. It was as good as any. It gave the detectives something tangible to refer to. Chief Inspector Scott Daly's team concentrated on the reams of witness statements and background checks into Mason and Judd. But it was Sunday, and everyone they needed to speak to was off until Monday. So, Daly left his mobile on and ducked out of the office to devote himself to the joys of flat-pack furniture and wallpaper paste. Leslie Hacker, the new superintendent, never clocked off. She had called him, probably from the gym as she balanced her file of facts on the handlebars of an exercise bike, demanding an update and urging him not to dally over his deliberations, suggesting it was probably accidental or misadventure. Daly doubted Judd or Mason would have remained in a room filling with gas, awaiting the inevitable. Her response was some kind of suicide pact, at which point Daly thanked her for her input and suggested they talk again during office hours. Then, with a crust forming on his wallpaper paste, she framed it in the context of departmental expenditure for that quarter. She advised him against unnecessarily setting expensive hairs running and gave him 48 hours to show some results. Given 24 of those were a Sunday, Daly replied it was still early days, unwisely prefixing it with all due respect, which, of course, it wasn't. He rang off, leaving the crust to form a little longer while he fetched a beer. Few things were as important as the incumbent superintendent supposed they were, as he used to think they were. 3:08, guys. Let me sleep, please. He pushed his focus back to Operation Scion. Occam's razor. The simplest solution is often the correct one. Come on, Occam. Earn your corn. Sonia Judd took Mason back to her flat for sex. But before that happened, she overdosed, hence a syringe in her arm. Or Mason injected her with heroin. Then, full of remorse for killing her, he set about taking his own life by turning on the gas, letting it build up, and then lighting a match. A goodbye cruel world gesture. Nice try, Arkham, but your theory has more holes than the back wall of number 5 Green Street. Mason was in a flat with a dead prostitute. Why not scalp her? Return to Pinner and join the lads for their drinks night. Why make things difficult? When they arrived, they would have smelled even the smallest quantity of gas. Turning on a light could have ignited it. Or Sonia's lighter as she liquefied her fix. So the gas must have started leaking after they arrived. Even so, Mason stayed there with Judd dead and oblivious to the danger for 5 hours until the gas ignited. Why? Unless he passed out first. Daly got up to make a cup of cocoa. As the kettle boiled, he sat watching the timer on the cooker flash the seconds, ticking away the minutes. With 20 years on the force, he'd seen many suicides. They'd all been personal acts, selfish even. Many of them were unintentional, cries for help that were not heeded or went too far. He couldn't recall a single instance of suicide where the act destroyed half a street. except for suicide bombers, but then their intention was murder, the suicide a means to an end. Or mass suicide, but then one could consider that murder by coercion. The clock on the cooker ticked over another minute. What wasn't he seeing? He finished his cocoa and returned to bed, hoping the merry-go-round in his head would stop. Sophie Jennings, the force's shrink, had taught him relaxation techniques following the accident that nearly put him to sleep for good. He tried counting sleep, but the furry bastards wouldn't jump in an orderly fashion, taking the fence 2, even 3 at a time, leaving him struggling to keep count. So he tried tortoises, who sat at the base of the fence, lifting their tiny legs in vain, unable to see a way over. Sleep, Scott, for God's sake. One tip was to write down the offending thought, to consign it to paper and let it lie. So he sat up and penned a quick text to Harry Ramesh at Loughton Street Forensic Laboratory. Harry, why did they stay in the flat as the gas built up? Why didn't they run out before the bang? Or switch off the gas? There, now it was somebody else's problem. Can't you sleep? Daly turned. Terry's silhouette was dark against the faint glow through the curtains. She smelled like everything good buried in the warmest, most comfortable part of the bed. A hand moved across his chest. What's up? She rolled onto her back. Just a work thing. But it was more than a work thing. It was a career thing, even a confidence thing. With Judd and Mason, he hung 2 more images in the gallery of his mind, grotesque and otherworldly. 2 more deaths laid on him to resolve. 2 more families looking to him for justice. Would a cuddle help? She pulled down his arm and he inched across the plane of coldness to the pool of warmth. He pecked the silhouette on the cheek. Always.
You want to know more? Buy the book, which is called An Invisible Murder. Brilliant. I like it. I like the bit where the guy sends the message to the forensic. Here, your problem now.
That's supposed to be the way it works, in that if you have an issue at night, I wake up at nights thinking the most stupid things, the most impossibly asinine things. And I think, I'll go into the office, I write them down on a piece of paper, thinking then that's going to get them out of my mind. And it never ever does. All I think is, I must remember I've written it on a piece of paper. So we gave Daly the benefit of the doubt that Harry Ramesh at the forensic laboratories will sort that out.
He's now going to sort it out. Yeah. Guy, you touched on some quite serious topics in that little chapter there. It's we shall liven it up a little bit, I think. I enjoy your style of writing. It's very good. I mean, it flows, considering all the amount of research you've had to do within this book.
I think the most important thing for me when I write is that I put myself in the mind of the person who is, in quotes, narrating at that particular point, the person who the story's about at that particular point. There are loads of other things going on in this book.
Can't tell too much.
But I can't tell anything about that.
Please, no. Otherwise it'll be shot again.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, all we have at the moment is the fact that they've been called out to this terraced house in an ordinary street just off Harrow Town Centre, and the thing has collapsed after a gas explosion. They know the people that were in there. Now they have to figure out why they were there and what it's all about. Of course, as Daly says, it could just be that somebody left the gas on. But then why didn't anybody smell it? Because gas doesn't remain contained in a room. It filters through floorboards. It goes out through gaps in windows when people open doors. So there's a lot on his mind at the moment, least of all, the fact that he has to solve this one, that people have died here. This is very important stuff. And he feels the weight of that very heavily as he goes through. And when things don't quite go his way, he has to try and rationalise why it's not going his way and how he can resolve that. When
you write that, do you battle with that when you're writing, as you as the person writing it? Do you come out, when you stop that bit of writing, how long does it take you to get back into the real world again?
I have to warm down for about 20 minutes afterwards.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah. What I do is I go downstairs and I'll put some quiz show on the TV. But it's also very important to warm up when you're doing writing. Anybody who's ever tried any of this, if you go in with the intention of writing 1,000 words, you'll write 25. If you go in with the intention of writing 25, you'll write 1,000. What you have to do is, as you finish writing the day on day one, to prepare for day two, write a few bullet points about the way your thoughts are going. So in the morning, you come back, you've already got a head start. And so then, when you start writing, and you write utter tripe, but slowly, over the period of about 3/4 of an hour, you get into your characters, and it starts becoming something that is keepable. And often, you will edit 1,000 words out to keep the 500 that are good.
Wow. That's one way of writing. That was Ryan Stark, tip number 3 on how to write a good book. I am the complete opposite with that. I cannot sit and write 1,000 words unless they mean something. It's quite strange. I'm a different sort of writer. And I find that beforehand, warming up, a bit like even if you're exercising, you've got to stretch. You've got to stretch your mind. You've got to stretch your mind into the story or into the poem, whatever it is you're writing. Then I get completely submersed in, and I'm writing from within. And then when I stop, equally so, you've got to go, back in the real world again. But the thing is that I've met people who write, chop, 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 write. And I go, it's an awful waste of energy of a lot of writing.
The interesting thing about An Invisible Murder, available in all good bookshops, is that it started off being well over 130,000 words.
Cool.
That's an awful lot of words, but most of it is tripe. In order to get it down to something which is readable, that will get people to buy the other books, because, of course, what I'm doing here is I'm selling several books. I'm not just selling one. Is to edit it properly. You will spend a lot of time. Out of the 100% of time to write a book, I would consider 25% of it is solid editing time. Yeah. And that is things like, if I just make up a situation, Daly made his way to the office. Just say Daly went to the office. Daly travelled to the office. It's using a much more appropriate word to get rid of 3 or 4. And you can edit down hundreds of words instantly like that. But you then have to consider certain rules about writing. In crime, they tend to think that although you've got your established characters, the murder investigation team, for example, you shouldn't get more than 4 or 5 characters in the rest of the story because your reader will lose track. Now, I don't belittle readers that much. I think they can cope with more than 4 or 5, but not too many because we want to try and focus. So I have to then look at if there are any stray bits of story we don't need anymore that were
a cull.
A cull. They were meaningful at the time, but we don't need them anymore. And then the other thing that's very, 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 very important is all this is based on a synopsis. So I start with a one line of what the book's about. I then convert that into 4 or 5 paragraphs of what the book is about. And then I go through what is called a beat sheet, which some of your listeners may have met. You will certainly have known about beat sheets in things that you will have watched on TV, if not books. They are orchestrated events that have to happen in a story for it to be readable. The one I always come to is the inciting incident. Really, at the start of a story, nothing matters to anybody. And then something happens. You're sitting on your porch and you're watching a plane go over. That's the opening scene. The plane crashes. That's an inciting moment. And then you get the catalyst, the thing that makes you want to work. Granny was on that plane. So then you're in the situation where you're building a story up. And later on in the book, you'll have an all is lost moment. And that is, get out of my office. You're a rubbish detective. You can't do anything right. Get out of my office now and never darken my door again. And the cop's completely lost. Then he has to build up from there. Now, the stories are all different. The points are all the same. And there are lots of different beat sheets you could choose from. And I chose just one to focus on. And then I fill it in. So in other words, I'm going from one sentence to 3 or 4 paragraphs to about 20 beat points, filling them in with a synopsis of what happens in that beat point and why it happens. And then I get into writing mode, creating a proper narrative to fit that.
That's what you call a good workout.
But if you read any of my books, a couple of them aren't based on beat sheets, so you won't notice it. But if you do read the books that are based on beat sheets, you'll see the beats. But they're all different in every book. The thing that causes the catalyst, the thing that causes the second exciting incident, the thing that causes the dark tower moment are all different in every book because they have to be.
Brilliant. I'm going to stop you there. Do you have a website?
It's ryanstarkauthor.co.uk.
There you go. And if you want any further tips, you can contact Ryan. We might answer, he might not, but you never know. I hope you've all learned something from today's Listen with Lee. It's been really good. And you know what? We have to finally have one last beat. So we'll have another song from you.
Okay. A few years ago, I was sitting at my desk and my boss came along and he said, Austin, you like music, don't you? Well, I was in a band at the time, so he knew that. He said, do you want to go and see the Eagles? After I'd picked myself off the floor, I said, yeah, okay. Okay, he says, I've got a bus. We've got a box seat at the O2 Arena for you to see the Eagles. So, of course, I went down with a load of other people who were much, much, much younger than me. And a lady called Olive I used to work with who was the same age as me. We sat at the front of the box in the O2 watching the Eagles, watching Joe Walsh, watching Glenn Fry, watching Don Henley. And they were all playing the music that we'd grown up with, that we knew every word to. And we were agog, singing along to it, Well, all the rest of the kids were in the back drinking the beer and eating the food. And I distinctly remember when Joe Walsh played the opening notes to Hotel California, which was the song which got me into playing the guitar when I was, 14. It was a jaw-dropping moment.
Fabulous.
So Hotel California.
Hotel California it'll be. And I will just end by telling you that I saw them before Hotel California came out.
Well, there you go.
In fact, you had Joe Walsh playing with his band. You had the Eagles then. Then you had the Beach Boys. And then you had Elton John, all at Wembley Stadium.
Oh, well.
That was a day to remember.
You're very much older than me if you remember the Beach Boys.
I'm afraid, sure. So, we will play Hotel California by the Eagles. Ryan, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure hearing tales and learning from you.
Yeah. Thanks, listeners, for listening.
A funny encounter happened to me the other day. I just parked up and began to walk away, when suddenly an elderly lady shouted out, while slowly walking aided by her sticks, "We are looking for a church." "What's this one called?" she asks. "We want Our Lady and All Saints Church." "Well, that's further round the ring road, just across the road. See, it's hiding behind the lamppost just over there." "So this isn't it? 'Cause we can't walk." "Is it Catholic?" "Why do you ask?" "Well, we're off to a friend's son's christening." "Well, not in here, you're not. This is the home of Black Country Radio, and the Dudley Summer Art Fair, if you please. And only a gent would do." I walked back to my car, beckoning them to follow as I opened the passenger door. "Hop in, me dears, and I'll drop you to your place. You'll make it for your christening, and if the good Lord looks down upon you, you'll be just in time for a lovely glass of wine."
You've been listening to Ryan Stark on the Listen with Lee show on Black Country Extra.
And all we have to say is, ta-ra-bit.
Ta-ra-bit.
And my right is, we've come to the end of the show. Oh, so till next time, you've been listening to Lee Benson, Black Country Extra, on the Listen with Lee show. That's all. I've really got to go. Oh. Ta-ra.
Live from the Black Country, online, on your mobile.